Hello and welcome to your weekly transits or updates. And my goodness, we kind of starting off this week with it's like sort of an agitation. Let's just get right into it. Well, yesterday we had Mars change signs. Mars just moved into Capricorn. So we have that influence. This was just, late yesterday. So we have now we're starting to begin our Capricorn season. Now we're going to start getting, some of these cardinal influences, with some of the big players. And yeah, we'll unpack that a little bit today. But so we had just had Mars moving in there. So, but Mars is exalted in there. But anytime we have a sign change, though, things can get a little murky. Things change. And then it can even just be a lot of hooping and hollering. I mean, even Mars didn't mind being in Sag, but now it gets to be exalted. So it kind of goes from a prince to a king, so there's a lot of roar from the crowd. But that is kind of putting a little, and it just, past the sun. I mean, it's also conjunct the sun still. Um, Now it's, not by sign, so it's starting to break away. But we still have that energy, right? We still have that fiery, loud kind of energy. All right, but the problem with that is the hair and the ointment is now, first Mars was squaring Saturn, and now that's kind of moved off of that, and now the sun is squaring Saturn. See, 25 of a mutable sign Sagittarius to 25 another mutable sign Pisces over here, Saturn. So okay, that could be all kinds of stuff. That could be why a day like today is very challenging, mistake laden. Oh my gosh, it's like, to me, it's like all day it's mistakes. It's like, oh God, what's my brain, what is going on in this, um just stuff interfering. It could be ego stifling, it could be frustrations, it could be authority, things instituting itself against you. It could be thwarted, um, personal aim, thwarted activity, thwarted enthusiasm, things turned down, things, you just hit that Saturn wall. Or it could be structuring over exaggerated stuff. We can go from the Saturn point of view. It's like, look, we got to put a little structure in this over the top stuff. We got to put a little limits on the spending. We need to put a few things in order. You just can't please everybody, all the time. This has got to start putting in some priorities. So anyway, it comes up against a rub, and it's just a difficult aspect, that happens frequently. So because it's a sun aspect, so the sun, will make its yearly transit, and we'll have that again. But anyway, um, we got that. Then, and let me just point it out, because we see, the forward motion. Things are now starting to march into Capricorn. But while they're going through we've got the sun, then Venus, and then Mercury, right? Because Mercury, had finished its retrograde in Scorpio and is heading back into Sag, which I believe today it's out of shadow. I believe it's 6 degrees. Or in a day or two that it will actually be, I think it's maybe 8 or 9. Think about it, will be out of shadow of where it was before it went retrograde. So we're now, maybe we'll start making in a few days some grounds, but we got this little bit of a murkiness still yet today. It's still not, I don't think, quite out of the shadow. Anyway, that being said, we have these planets here marching out of Capricorn or Sagittarius, and then everybody will start to move into Capricorn season. So this week, I wrote over here on the left some of the highlights of this week. We have the moon going through Scorpio and then into Sag. So it's going to be sweeping through there. And we're going to have a new moon in Sag at 28 degrees. So it will be making these aspects that I'm going to talk about to Saturn and Neptune as well. As it gets closer to its new moon, it will be like, right, it'll be 28 degrees. So it'll be squaring like the midpoint almost of those two, which will be intense. So new moon here. And then we also have the winter solstice, December 21st. The sun moves into Capricorn. And then we have several squares of Saturn and Neptune. So we can have restrictions and confusion. So yeah, just try to really work through the murkiness here. So that being said, we hit this week running hard. We kind of hit a wall. Do you ever see anybody? You know what it reminds me of? And I gotta laugh because it is funny, and I've done this, but not as bad as I've seen some other people. Do you ever see anybody walk into a sliding glass door and they thought it was open? I mean, they just go boink, they bounce right off of it. And you can see their nose print and everything. It's terrible. It's bad. It's like it's a real bad injury, but it's funny. It's just like you just bonk, didn't see it. It's kind of like that this week. So if you could just imagine that, I mean, starting like today and tomorrow and stuff, you can just kind of imagine that and walk with a little intrepidation there. That's kind of how it is. So anyway, just thought I'd give you that visual. So let's move past this. It's okay. So we have that today. We have the sun moving there. Okay, so restriction on that level to see. Then the sun is going to be moving toward its square to Neptune. It'll like move off of Saturn and then come into Neptune, and then Venus will go into Saturn and then onto Neptune. So we got this little parade, and then we have Mercury doing that. Okay, then the moon sweeps over. So we have this little dance with all of these conversations going on with Saturn and then Neptune. So let's just unpack that a little bit so it's not so confusing when each day I tell you, okay, this one's going to do square over here, and then this one's going to square over here. All right, so squares to a mutable sign is probably the better of all the squares because it's mutable. So that means it won't last. A fixed square sucks. They will never, it's like a fixed square, somebody mad, they will just stay mad. They'll stay crossed, it'll stay fixed on it. You can't get past it. You got to wait for time and schmoozing and things to water that down. Fixed squares suck. Cardinal ones aren't as bad. They're probably the second worst. Fixed the worst than cardinal because they're bombastic. It can be very sudden and in your face, but mutable ones are kind of fuzzy. They're the better ones. They kind of mute the harshness of the square. It may put in order and structure and not be so hard. It won't like rub your nose in dog shit kind of a square. It's just like, that's not very nice rather than, that kind of energy. So it's all going to come through there, but it can be a little mushy and wishy-washy. So let's just put it that way. It can be over the top, dramatic, maudlin, martyr-like. Just take all that with a grain of kelp. Okay, so sun first. We already talked about that one, and then let's just look at that real quick. Then we'll have. Okay, so they have the Saturn one and then the Neptune one. So otherwise, it being wishy-washy, it's still there. Okay, and it's still potent. So Saturn, the square to Saturn is dealing with structure, authority, the way it should be done, dealing with errors. Dealing. You've got that Saturnian, responsibility. I said I was going to do this. How am I going to get it done? Things are fuzzing out. Things like that. Then it kind of slips over into Neptune, which could be, if you get it done in Saturn, then you can enjoy the Neptune high, kind of, the Neptune ride, the Neptune openness of expansion, the creation, the moving on. I think if you don't deal with the Saturn, you're going to be stuck in disillusionment and being fooled, being tricked, being schmoozed. If you take the Saturn, if you don't do the lesson, or if you don't do what you're supposed to or follow through, then you're going to have to deal with a bad Neptune. Let's just put it that way. Bad consequences. So I think that's the lesson in this. So first with the sun, let's just take the sun all the way through it. The sun comes up against some kind of an authority, an inner authority, an outer authority, a Piscean, but it's like, do you really have to invest that much energy into this? Are you really want this? Can't you dissolve some of this kind of, that because it's in Pisces? So this is the last one that it will make this square before it's going to be onto its next track, right? It's going to be in Aries next year, so when the sun squares, it will be into a whole different line. So this is kind of like, the last bit of maybe sweeping out any confusion, any contradictions, anything on the ego level you don't need. then when it goes into, the square then to Neptune, and you've got that cleared out. You can't be faked out, you can't be fooled, you can't be schmoozed, and you don't want to do that going outward either. You don't have any intentions putting it the other way, and that will make the sun clean as it goes through that. Then Venus goes through there. So Venus squares Saturn first. So what was that about? So again, we have that mutable energy, Venus, in that enthusiastic, Saturn, over the top, bubbly, and then it's squaring over there to Neptune in dissolving Pisces. Well, Venus likes to be, it's exalted in Pisces, so it kind of like, from Venus's point of view, probably doesn't mind the square so much. It gets a chance to put in its maybe it's tall order. It's like, well, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to eat that, I want to have it this way or this way. If I'm going to go on my diet, then I want it to be like this. Kind of put in a structure that way before it can then melt into that that place where it likes to be, that fantasy land with Neptune, right? So I think, again, you've got to pay the piper before you get the ride. You've got to put in the discipline, or maybe what Venus is say, go through, the square. What do you want? Or things with love or with relationships. Is this really how you want it? Is this what you intended? Can we communicate this a little better before we sort of go offline and fuzz out? All right, Venus. Then, well, we'll have the moon going over there. So let me just mention that, because then we'll have Mercury. So the moon going through there, the moon over to Saturn, that's kind of like emotionally limiting or restructuring, or trying to get that I'm trying to think from Saturn's point of view, trying to get that slippery moon, or that irregularity or that inconsistency nailed down. Maybe that's also could how it could be interpreted. Looking at that, from Saturn's point of view, at the moon, kind of structuring that emotion. It's like, look, let's get this emotional thing under control, not in a harsh way, because it's in a nice sign. And then again, from Venus's, from the moon's point of view, then it's like, maybe getting the moon a little bit more structured. I mean, it already has a schedule, right? So it can, it does its monthly rhythm, right? It does its new moon, full moon thing every month. So maybe just tying it back into its own ritual is kind of the theme with that. And then Mercury, the last one to kind of hit all, to hit those. So Mercury, the mind, it might help structure the mind, hitting up with Saturn, help putting a little discipline in the mind with the thought, being more on task, making less mistakes, moving things forward, dotting your I's, crossing your T's, paying attention. It's like making you, it's because it's fuzzy and you can't hear or see, you got to try harder. And by trying harder, it will, pull you through the task. And then it can then when it goes over, squares over to Neptune, hopefully it won't get fooled and deceived. That's the part of it. It's with that. I think, again, if you pay the piper on the front end with Saturn, then the Neptune fuzzy fool you trickery part won't be so contentious. So that's a lot, and that's, I'm not, I'll just go through the days, but this is kind of what we're going to have for the next, they'll be going through for the next week and a half. I think January is when January 1st was when the final one, Mercury does. But we got all of that, those inner planets. Mars just did, right? Then we have Sun, Mercury, Venus, Moon. So all the inner ones are going to be doing that. Ding, 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 with this Saturn structured nebulous Neptune. So all those making aspects. Then as that happens, then they all click into going into Capricorn. So we're all gonna, we're gonna get going into Capricorn season. So here we go. You can see now the moon. Look at this tight little arrangement. This is, as the moon comes over here near the end of the week, as we're coming into the new moon, it'll be at 28 degrees we have this little tight, oh, starting Thursday we get this, when the moon clicks in here we'll get this tight little stellium. We have three planets, and then the moon kicks in here, so two lights and two planets, and then we'll all, like within the month they'll be over in Capricorn side. But here we go. So Thursday, we get into our nice Sag. Let's see, was there anything else? Not really. No, this is good. Coming into Thursday, we're getting into our new moon, and I really like the new moon, the Sag new moon. This is when you can put some far-reaching Sagittarius concepts into the mix. You can make those, new moon is a time for new things, new intentions. Make those long-term thoughts clear, a lot of the debris that, the mental debris, the emotional debris out of the way. I mean, we're starting into a new year, so a real good time to do that, and use it to be festive and in the holidays. And if you don't get into the holidays, it's still a holiday time and holiday mood. And religious orientation, they all take on different themes, but it's really the Yule time, in the Northern Hemisphere and then worldwide. And it's, it is what you make of it at the end of the day, what you have in your mind about it. But just to experience the warmth and upbeatness of all of that, even though there's a lot of commercialism abound, and bureaucracy and all of that stuff that weaves through it, just that season for the Yule, and coming more into the heart. So last little bit of Sag we have here, and then there's the moon late in the day. It'll be late in the day on the East Coast. You can see it's almost there. Let's see when we're, and then I'll just leave it there. Anyway, so then the moon goes by. Let's see, Saturday. Then we start getting into, okay, Saturday we have our sun square Neptune there, right? We already did the Saturn at the beginning of the week, and then you can see it's 29. Oh, look. Okay, so both on Saturday we have both squares from sun going over to Neptune, and then Venus starts it with Saturn. So this can kind of a little bit of a double whammy. And the moon will have just moved into Capricorn in an opposition, that's opposite of where it's in its fall. It doesn't like to be there. It'd rather be in its home or exaltation, but, or I should say detriment. But so it could be a little dour day, a little downer day. And then the moon, and then the sun is then almost ready to move into Capricorn. So we're going to have this little, I don't want to say Capricorn is a downer, but sometimes, it's, we hit up against all the Saturn, and then we get a lot of the responsibility and a lot of the weight, and toe the line and move forward kind of energy all at once, which, a lot of people need to be disciplined a bit, but it could be a little bit of like, let's do it. Step 2, come on. Get up. We've had all the Sagittarius energy here. So now all of a sudden it's like the alarm clock's going off, you're not answering it, you're sleeping, you're fast asleep, and somebody comes in and turns it off and yanks the pillows or the covers off of you, and, open the curtains, and so it's that kind of energy. So again, if we haven't kind of dealt with the Saturnian things, we're going to be forced to here, I believe. All right, Saturday. So those squares begin. What else do I want to tell you on those? So, be a little bit attentive. Like when the moon, when the sun is square to Neptune, we've got other people can cause us confusion and disappointment. It could also weaken your vitality. You could feel unmotivated, overwhelmed, maybe feel sorry for people or sorry for something. Maybe like martyr-like, as I was saying earlier, maybe you're unsure of yourself, your limitations, maybe your creativity's blocked. So, you might want to nap on this day if you can. You just go to sleep. Might have poor recuperative powers. A lot of people are overdoing it for the holidays anyway, and it would, you try to do too much, and this aspect could make it really bad for people, that you're burning burning the oil at both ends. Not a good thing. And then the Saturn, the Venus square Saturn is kind of, again, difficulty being assertive in relationships, maybe not wanting confrontation, or emotional disputes, maybe limitations or restrictions on emotions. And then one other thing about the sun and Neptune, it's like, you're it could be like you're seeing only the best in people increases the chance of disillusionment, and then over idealization and gullibility can lead to loss and scandal and slander. So it's like one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't, or just, you got to watch your butt on that one. All right, moving into Sunday, kind of um, kind of passing a few of these things. We've got the solstice, we got the sun there moving into Capricorn, and now look at, and then like a day, we're at all the Sag, and now look at 1, 2, 3. The moon moved here, sun moved there, Mars is already here. We're just like going to be in a different era. It's like boop, difference, right? Um, and then Monday we have the moon moving into Aquarius, and then going right over Pluto. Oh my gosh. So here could be, some unearthing of emotions, some deep dive into emotions, into moods, feelings, um, looking underneath something, maybe having the intuitive inclination to follow it, to unearth something, also to get to the bottom of something, to really know something at a deep level. And it's like, I knew it. The intuition can be validated. Yes, ma'am. Yep. Okay, so that's basically our week ahead. We're changing seasons now, changing gears. You see, we've got a bit of this energy shifting. Now it's kind of cool here that, like, right in the middle of this little Capricorn blurt, then the moon squirts into Aquarius over by Pluto, but we still have this big Saturn ruled glob of stuff. We go from the establishment to the people, kind of, with it could be like in a day. We've got still Sun and Mars here together, but then Moon and Pluto could really stir things up. So yeah, kind of watched, Sunday into Monday, and we'll regroup next week. All right, thank you for listening. More to follow. Bye for now.